Before we get started, I just wanted to kind of say anecdotally, we just came from a ribbon cutting. Is it okay if I walk around, or is that a problem for you? Are we okay? All right. We just came from a ribbon cutting over in the Combs building with our ASL program and a group out of Utah called Sorensen Communications, which is the largest provider of sign language services. So let's say Gene is hard of hearing. He goes to the doctor. He can't communicate with the doctor. Sorensen has this software whereby he calls an 800 number. It gets directed into a call center. These call centers are in Manhattan, Seattle, Austin, Texas, and now on the third floor of the Combs building. And depending on the availability, it gets sent to one of our students who from 8 to 8, Monday through Friday, the person who's hearing impaired, Gene's face pops up on the screen. He signs what he needs to the interpreter, who then types back to the car salesman, the doctor, the pharmacist, whoever it is, and then they read it on a smartphone or anything else. And it's an amazing service that changes the lives of people and makes it so much easier for them to navigate what's an already very difficult life circumstance in which they find themselves. And Sorensen found out about it. They did this for the military back in the first Persian Gulf War. They were the company that provided all of the two-way video conferencing free of charge to all of our military personnel. And they recognized that their technology was so far superior to anything else that anybody else had. They found out about our sign language program and are now offering this partnership for our students to get on-the-job training. Then when they graduate, chances are they're going to get hired full-time with Sorensen. So if you have a chance, go up to the third floor of Combs. You know what I'm talking about, Ryan. It's right down the hall from where you are, I think. It's an unbelievable setup. They've got 7 stations with our students working these screens. So the reason I tell you that is that's an example, I believe, of the partnerships that we need to help push EKU forward now and in the future. Particularly in the context of what I want to talk about today, because I'm going to show you some numbers which I hope are, number one, alarming, and number two, inspiring in the sense that they will propel you to action. You've heard me say this before. We have in America our First Amendment rights. A lot of people talk about the Second Amendment. They talk about the Fifth Amendment. There are a lot of other important amendments. We only have 26 of them to our Constitution. But the First Amendment guarantees the right of assembly like we're doing today. It allows me to say whatever I want. It allows you to respond any way you want. It allows us to go to church at a church of our choosing, not be compelled to go to a Roman Catholic or a Protestant or a Buddhist church or a temple. But the last part of the First Amendment is that you and I have the right to do what? Petition the government for a redress of grievances. So as I talk today about why our tuition is going to go up again, you're going to see why that's the case. Because in the state of Kentucky since 2008, state support of higher education has gone down an alarming 24%. And our case is not unique. When I show you this bar chart in just a second, you'll see that in Arizona, it's gone down 80%. So what had been a practice for generations in our country with support, public support of public higher education, where it was viewed as a public benefit as opposed to a private good, we are seeing a sea change that now states are focusing on what? Corrections, health and human services, even roads. Those are all very important. I'm not arguing kind of for one or the other. But the fact of the matter is, you and I live in a society where higher education is valued less and less and less. And it's viewed, as I said to the President's Council this morning, more as a consumption. There's now a consumption tax on higher ed. And what is that? Tuition. And fortunately and unfortunately, we have the benefit of being able to kind of adjust either how much we take in or how little we increase our tuition. And other state entities don't have that. How do they fund local schools here in Madison County? How are schools funded? Property tax. And how often is your property assessed? usually annually, isn't it? And there's not a whole lot of fluctuation unless you have some big swings in the market. And over time, real estate is one of those commodities that doesn't have really big swings. It does sometimes, but in point of fact, tuition is that one thing that we have at our disposal that legislatures are now saying, well, you can get the money that we're not going to give you, and you can make it up, and you can put it on the backs of your students. So that's kind of a rambling preamble to what I want to talk about in terms of why we're increasing our tuition this year. But I hope it gives you also some context that our situation is not unique. This is current rates in Kentucky. So you can see that we're pretty much middle of the pack. This is undergraduate cost per semester, and that's graduate per credit hour. So the only ones that eclipse us, UK, U of L, Western, Northern, we're right there, just above Morehead, Murray, and Kentucky State. So that's where we currently are. To give you an idea of why we're doing this today, CPE, the Council on Post-Secondary Education, as you know, has very limited statutory authority, but one of the responsibilities they do have is setting the tuition rates. This last go-around, the next slide will show you that they decided to do it on a 2-year table. And they've also said that the resident undergraduate rate must be within an established parameter. So you can't exceed whatever they set as the threshold. They also have said that the undergraduate rate for non-residents must be at least twice the resident. Now, why do you think they say that? Anybody? Why would this CPE say, David, you're from Ohio, so we're going to charge you at least twice? Why would they say that, David? Okay. The state of Kentucky funds Kentucky institutions, so we should have the benefit of our students paying a reduced amount or amount at a certain level, whereas those that come from outside of the state, if they're going to benefit themselves of our institutions, they should pay a higher rate. I don't disagree with that. Some states, if Karen, for example, moved to New Mexico and she established residency after a year or 2 years, she could then get the in-state resident rate for a New Mexico resident. We did that in Utah after 1 year. They actually extended it 2 years, thinking that revenue would increase, and it actually decreased because fewer people decided to come from out of state. So the benefit of having an international student, because not only does it diversify our student population, but they pay full freight. They pay the times 2 or whatever the amount is that our in-state students will pay. Now, this last year, as I said, the CPE said, okay, you cannot exceed 8% over the 2-year period. They then came back and said you can't exceed 5% because the governor came out and said you can't exceed 5%. So in many ways they said, okay, we'll give you the freedom to decide what you're going to do within the 8% range, but by the way, you can't exceed 5%. Now you may say, well, why did you go at 5.1? It's not that we were thumbing our nose at the CPE or the governor. We would never do that. Why did it do that, Karen? It was a rounding issue, and it had to do with, in effect, making the numbers work because this year we're proposing a 2.9% increase. So you can take in the aggregate the 2 years, it's 8%. All right? Now, why are we going up 2.9%? I'm going to give you some statistics here, and if you're interested, we're going to post this online, but I would encourage you to take a look at this report. This is put out by the Council on Budget and Policy on Public Policy Initiatives, I believe is the name of it. Washington, D.C. trade organization or a public policy think tank that's done all sorts of studies looking at what states have done with tuition rates, with state appropriations, and how they've had to make up over the last, particularly the last 10 to 12 years. What is alarming is this first line. We rank in the bottom 10 in terms of funding progress since 2014. So before the Great Recession of what, 2000, when was that, 7 and 8? Higher ed was kind of at a nice little clip. We were recovering after 9/11. Things were going pretty well, then all of a sudden, you know what happened? The real estate market collapsed. financial markets were incredibly strained. So states cut back. They have now started to kind of come out of that, but we're on the unfortunate circumstance now of finding ourselves within those 10 states that have not increased funding. In point of fact, while most states have increased, Kentucky actually cut funds to higher ed by 1.5%. So I would be an ingrate if I didn't get up here and tell the legislature how grateful I am for their support, especially for our science building. For the state to make a capital investment like they did of $540 million plus on campuses throughout our state is, I think, it gives us cause for some celebration and also some optimism. But in reality, it's a little sobering to consider that everybody else is trending this way, and we're headed the other direction. We've actually reduced funding for higher ed by 25% since 2008. And what does that mean to you as a student? That means when adjusted for inflation, the state has decreased per student $2,600. That's a lot of money. You know, do the math. 2,600 times, what, 16,000 full-time students or head count, what, 11 and a half or 12,000 full-time students. That is quite a bit of money. So again, I encourage you to take a look at that site. And one of the slides, and you won't be able to see this very well, but I'll just point out where we fit. This says percentage change in funding for higher education adjusted for inflation. So Arizona, I mentioned to you before, 80% has been cut. Kentucky's right here at 25.5% of where we've been cut. So this results in what is the cost borne by students. In Arizona, that means they've been cut almost $5,000 per student. Look at Arizona State, one of the largest metropolitan universities in America, with how many? Jan, how many students they had at ASU? I think they're up to like 75,000 now. 75,000 times 5,000 per student. Kentucky is right in here somewhere at 2,600. So we're in a tough spot. So what this means is that you, the student, must bear the cost of funding higher education. We have fixed costs. We have to keep the lights on. We have to keep buildings maintained. Electricity rates certainly vary. Price of coal, price of natural gas. But there are things that we have to do to keep the lights on and keep the doors open. And those fixed costs do not fluctuate. They certainly don't go down nearly as much as they go up. Isn't that right, Barry? So, again, to kind of give you an idea of where we compare, to go back to one of the original slides, that's where we are currently, and I anticipate with our fee and our tuition, we'll go up slightly this year, but we'll still be behind NKU based on what they're proposing for their tuition increase. So this is what we're proposing in terms of per semester for tuition. Now, the targeted rate of tuition, I don't know how many students we have here, but how many of the students came here before 2012 with a targeted tuition where we actually went out and recruited students from targeted specific areas to try and attract different kinds of students to come to EKU. That's being phased out. So all the ones that are here on that targeted tuition, once they're phased out, we will no longer offer targeted tuition. But that gives you an idea of both the percentage change, per credit hour, non-resident, online courses, for both undergraduate, and this next slide is for graduate. Again, I know I'm going through slides in kind of rapid fashion, but this will all be posted on my site, on the President's Office site, and you can review the numbers. So here is this is per credit hour, the charge for our graduate programs, online courses, graduate online programs, and then our doctoral programs. Reason we don't have any data right here from our PsyD program is what? It's brand new. So our fall cohort will be our first ever group of PsyD students, which is I was talking today to Jana. SACS, which is our regional accrediting body, has informed us that we have moved now from a Category 5 institution to Category 6, which means we offer 4 or more doctoral programs. So that's a significant advancement for us to have now a clinical degree in psychology, a doctoral degree in psychology. Okay, let me stop there and see if there are any questions about tuition, because I want to make sure we've covered what you all want to cover with regards to why tuition is going up. And we'll have questions also at the end if you want to ask them then. Anybody? If not, let's talk a bit about meal plans and housing. Meal plans and housing, again, another one of those somewhat fixed costs. We base it on a consumer price index of where we're trying to kind of hit a targeted rate for our increase. We use the South region because, as you know, food prices and food production costs vary by region. Ours is the South region, and we have the food at home and food away from home has advanced 3% since January of 2014. So that CPI, of course, is a kind of a sliding scale, and we base our prices on that. So at the 3% rate for meal plans, you can see the increases there, what they are for both residential students based on what kind of meal plan they purchase, and also on faculty and staff. Again, all based on a 3% increase based on the CPI. This is not just some arbitrary number we pick out of the sky. It's based on numerical data that we've gleaned from an index like that. So average increase across all housing rates is 5%, and I will tell you how that works out for double and single rates. Again, you can see with no amenities, some amenities, and then our new construction of both Grand Campus and the new hall. Again, with a 5% increase. Gene, how do we settle on a 5% for housing? I didn't mean to put Gene on the spot, but I did.
Sure. Basically, the 5% increase was based on the Board of Regents approval for a 5-year consecutive 5% increase due to the debt retirement for new hall and also for the lease agreement.
Okay. So the 5%, have we kind of locked in on that for a certain period of time?
5 years, I think, for this
Third year?
third year.
Okay. So again, that's not an arbitrary number, but the Regents considered some of the debt we've taken on with New Hall and the lease agreement with the Grand Campus, and the rates are based on that 5%. Barry, something you want to add? Okay. Let's talk for just a second about fees. You've heard, I'm sure, a bit about the special use fee, and the reason we had to have the election or the vote taken in the Student Senate is anytime you have a special use fee that's for a specific purpose, the students have to approve that fee either through a referendum, which is done campus-wide, and 25% of your campus has to vote. And we went back and looked at the average voter turnout of the last 5 years. Anybody want to take a stab at the highest percentage of students that voted in an election over a 5-year period? Anybody want to take a stab at it? A little bit too high. 11%. So we were less than half of what we needed to have just for participation to have any sort of special use fee considered. So the Senate took it up, and per CPE statute and regulations, it had to pass 75% of your elected student representatives. It passed at 83%. The reason the students had to approve it is it would be in excess of the tuition that's been approved and the fees at that 8% that I talked about before. And it has to be for a specific purpose and have a specific period of time. So it's 20 years for student-centric facilities, namely the renovated student union and the phase 2 of a rec center, or a new rec center, whichever the students decide they would like to do. So the CPE is the one that kind of directed us and coached us and advised us how to go about this process. And we've done everything they've asked us to do, and the students ratified that last week. So that fee will then be added to the tuition increase in the room and board for this coming year. You may say, boy, I mean, this is a lot of money going to fund my education, quite a bit of an increase. To circle back to where I began, the fact of the matter is, just like states across our country, Kentucky is grappling with encumbrances, pledges they've made to our citizens of our state, and those bills are coming due. I'm also referring to the pension hole that you may have read a bit about. David, how much is it? $3.1 billion? So you have your teachers' pension fund, and then you have a Kentucky State employee pension fund. And because of budget cuts and other things, the legislature hasn't funded it. So their actuaries are saying, boy, this is a real problem because you have about a $5 billion liability on your books here that if you don't start putting money away and coming up with the funds to fund it, you're going to have people retire with no pension, the pension they've been promised, the pension they've been working for as a 8th grade school teacher. And so the House this year came up with an idea. They said, well, interest rates are good, so let's borrow $3 billion and pay it over a period of time and start putting into our pension, into that hole. Well, the problem with $3 billion going to a pension hole is that completely limits you in terms of capital projects. I don't think EKU would see another facility, new facility built for what, 10 to 12 years? The debt ratio that the state would take on would then lower our Moody's rankings, our ratings. The bond agencies would come in and say, boy, Kentucky is highly leveraged. If something were to happen, what's the backstop? I mean, you'd have to have a tax increase. There are all sorts of things that could happen. So while fees, tuition is going up, I want you to bear in mind, as I said at the beginning, that this is a direct result of the fact that our state has other obligations, and they've chosen to fund some of those obligations at the expense of public higher education. And that does not bode well for us as a society, nor does it bode well for you as a student at Eastern Kentucky University. Because unless something changes, my guess is this time next year, I'll come back and say we have to have another tuition increase. I don't know what it will be. In talking to Barry and some others, I would love to get up today and say we're not going to have a tuition increase next year. That would be the best possible news I could probably give you. But I can't paint ourselves into that corner, not knowing what's on the horizon. So that's kind of where we are, and that's what we propose. With that, I'd be happy to take any questions you might have. Or Janet, do you want to say anything? Barry, Karen, anything you want to add? I'll get on my soapbox for just a second while you're thinking of questions. And that is George Washington. I'm working on a book right now. And George Washington, Alexander Hamilton is famous for advocating for a national bank. He was a firm proponent that to secure a financial system that America was not ready to handle, the only way you could do that was to have a national bank. Control the flow of money, you could somehow control inflation, control prices, control a lot of different things. That didn't quite work out. The other proponent of a national entity was George Washington. He wanted a national university. Now fast forward about 130 years, another proponent of public higher education, just like George Washington, who never graduated from college, was my hero, Harry Truman. And in 1947, he had a commission that studied the benefits of public higher education, particularly in light of a public policy that had gone into place 3 years earlier, which completely changed forever public higher ed in this country. What am I talking about? Gene? The GI Bill. Did you have members of your family, Gene, that benefited from the GI Bill? Did you benefit from it? He could. You could probably go out to school right now if you wanted to. That changed forever access for a whole segment of our society to give them the chance to have an education. People who thought that their whole life would be in the service industry or in a blue-collar job, which is very meaningful work. We all have our skills and we all have points of entry into the job, kind of job market. But these people really had no hope whatsoever that they'd ever have a chance to get an education. And the GI Bill changed that. So the two I mean, the juxtaposition of Washington and Truman to me is really significant. Truman never graduated from college, nor did Washington. And here were two presidents that, more than any of their respective centuries, argued for a system in our country of public higher education, because it does what? It's a public benefit for all of us. The more education we have, the less reliant we are on all the services I talked about. We're going to be healthier. We're going to have less need for Medicaid and Medicare, for social services. We're going to vote. We're going to participate in the electoral process. We're going to run for office. We're going to go to church. We're going to be civically minded. I know, again, I'm speaking to the choir here, but this is something I feel very strongly about, because it's an alarming trend in our country that we've got to stem. And unless we can convince legislators to stem it and to support public higher education, every year we're going to come back and say we have to have another increase. And this year it'll be 3%. Next year it may be 4%, it may be 5%. We're not sure, but that's kind of where we are. So really the onus falls to us. I mean, we can exercise our First Amendment rights and go out and lobby our elected representatives and make a case. That's why we went to Frankfurt, what, a month ago? That's why every chance we get, we lobby Jared Carpenter and Rita Smart and Jonathan Schell and our other friends in the legislature. But there has to be I think a kind of an uprising among all of us to support education. Okay, I'll stop there. Enough preaching for today. Any comments, questions? Okay, if not, we'll end it there. Jim, I don't see Jim back there, but this will be posted. Oh, there's Jim. This will be posted online, and you can go back and review it. If you have any questions, please let me know, or email Barry or Karen or Jan or anybody. But we appreciate your participation. Thanks for coming today. Thank you very much.